welcome to this week's edition of World Today. I'm Geeta Mohan and we begin with the disputed waters of the South China Sea, where the United States of America, Japan and the Philippines are flexing their strategic muscles. In a show of unity, they've staged joint law enforcement drills to reinforce their alliances in the region. But as tensions rise, there's a renewed debate about the composition of the Quad, the strategic alliance between the US, Japan, Australia and India. Some are suggesting that the Philippines might be better suited for this role, while India could focus more on economic engagement. We have an in-depth analysis on the situation. Take a look.
In the face of continued rivalry with China in the Indo-Pacific, the United States, Japan and the Philippines are demonstrating their joint readiness. Earlier in the week, they staged drills in the waters near the disputed South China Sea.
Now, this isn't the first time that we had an exercise with Japan. This is not the first time we had an exercise with the US Coast Guard. However, this is the very first time that we had an exercise with the three countries. So we're very happy and hope that this exercise will increase our relationship with them so that ang Coast Guard po natin will get better, stronger.
The United States deployed the Stratton, one of its most advanced cutters, while Japan brought the Akitsushima, a large Coast Guard ship. As the US and China vie for influence in the region, the Quad, a strategic alliance between the US, Japan and Australia and India, have been a focus of discussion, with analysts suggesting that the Philippines might be a better fit for the Quad than India. It is a defense ally of the US and shows less reluctance to confront China.
The tensions across the Taiwan Straits seem to be continuing to increase. Then the safety of our Filipino nationals in Taiwan becomes of primordial importance. And so that these EDCA sites will also prove to be useful for us should that terrible occurrence come about. And so again, it's all we have a very defensive posture.
Meanwhile, India seems more comfortable being part of an economic engagement in the Indo-Pacific, demonstrated by Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Papua New Guinea.
Our shared goals are clear: to deter aggression and to deepen the rules and norms that promote prosperity and prevent conflict. So we're stepping up planning and coordination and training with our friends from the East China Sea to the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean. That includes staunch allies such as Australia, Japan, Republic of Korea, the Philippines and Thailand. It includes as well such valued partners as India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and clearly our host here today in Singapore.
With the dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region evolving, the roles and alliances of these nations may be subject to change as they navigate the choppy waters of global politics and security. Bureau Report, India Today.
So we are seeing a lot of shift in the South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific, particularly to do with Philippines that has become a real player in the region. To discuss a little more on this, I'm being joined by Don McLean-Gill, who's based out of Manila, Philippines, and is a geopolitical expert who's been coming to our show more often than not. Don, many thanks for joining us and coming back to World Today.
Thank you so much, Geeta.
Don, beginning with the entire naval exercise and what we're looking at could be a future cooperation between Philippines and the rest of the Quad members sans India.
Right, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is a true pleasure. Now, first we have to take note that the contemporary international cooperation, the characteristics of contemporary international cooperation is best defined by a more flexible area-specific arrangement rather than rigid pacts. So, of course, the Indo-Pacific is perhaps the most dynamic and complex region in the world. So, therefore, the proliferation of such arrangements, such as the Quad where India is part, and now this emerging Quad where the Philippines is part, among like-minded countries will be crucial, to address the equally dynamic security issues in the vast region. Now, of course, as we can see, since 2016, there has been an upsurge in the strengthening of security partnership between the Philippines and India. So definitely, as these two arrangements continue to solidify, there could definitely be a bridge where all like-minded democratic countries would be able to, of course, engage and, of course, address both contemporary issues in the Indo-Pacific.
But Don, very specifically, now we have a strategic economic grouping or bloc such as the Quad, which includes India, and then we have other groupings coming up such as the AUKUS, now this trilateral exercise, clearly showing that there are countries who want to engage more militarily. Could India lose out because India is reluctant in moving in militarily? The other countries do not have as high stakes as India does, given that China is an immediate neighbor.
Right, and coming off from that particular point, India is situated in the most complex, I'd say, geopolitical neighborhood. Two nuclear-armed rivals on both sides seeking to nibble on its sovereignty and sovereign rights. But again, India's role in the Indo-Pacific is undeniable and irreplaceable. Okay, as a major democratic Indo-Pacific power, the fifth largest economy, a formidable military force, a large young population, perhaps being one of the few Indo-Pacific powers that can really stand up to China's belligerence, India is an undeniable portion and component of the stability of the Indo-Pacific. And India is part of several sub-regional arrangements, such as the Quad, two other Quad-like arrangements in the Middle East, and a series of area-specific trilateral arrangements, such as the India-France-UAE arrangement, the India-Japan-Australia, and the India-France-Australia. So, the emergence of the Quad with the Philippines, for example, will be important in giving more emphasis on the South and East China Seas. So with the availability of such arrangements, among like-minded countries, India will in fact be able to leverage on these networks, and synergize efforts. Yeah.
Right. And my final question, Don, where do you see this headed for Philippines and other important countries in Southeast Asia? Are we looking at another military bloc which could involve Philippines? And which are the other Southeast Asian countries that you are monitoring right now sitting in Manila?
Right. You have to understand the nature of Southeast Asian countries is quite different. Okay, so in general, Southeast Asian countries are quite wary of engaging deeper in bloc politics. So this is why the role of India in the Quad, for example, is seen as a necessary insurance for Southeast Asian countries that it won't turn into some sort of an Asian NATO. With the Philippines in particular, of course, what needs to be understood is that this particular arrangement within and among the U.S. hub-and-spoke system in the Western Pacific is crucial for the Philippines' goal towards its territorial integrity, territorial defense, and maritime security. But of course, some Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, for example, are quite wary of such arrangements. However, based on the history of Southeast Asia, nothing can be impossible. Anything is possible with the help of proper diplomatic channels. And of course, this would be necessary on the part of the Philippines and the other Quad members, of course, to be able to engage more proactively with other Southeast Asian countries, because by nature ASEAN is flexible. So the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific is proof.
That exactly is the story over here. We're looking at inclusion of Philippines. While the other countries could be a little wary of China, it certainly seems like military blocs and economic blocs are coming up to counter Chinese aggression in the region. Thank you so much, Don, for joining us here on World Today.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you.
And news from Eastern Europe, we find ourselves amidst the escalating situation in Ukraine. The breach of the Kakhovka Dam, one of the largest reservoirs in the world, has stirred the waters of conflict, quite literally, between Ukraine and Russia. While the disaster's immediate impact is apparent in the flood-stricken region, it also affects the strategic dynamics of the war, with some analysts suggesting this could serve the interests of both sides.
Amid the ongoing war with Russia, Ukraine has faced an unexpected hurdle. The collapse of the Kakhovka Dam has unleashed a torrent of water, flooding surrounding towns and farmland and forcing hundreds of civilians to flee.
Everything is submerged in water. All furniture, fridge, food, all flowers. Everything is floating. I do not know what to do.
But the implication of this disaster go beyond immediate human suffering. The dam's breach has added a new layer of complexity to the Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russian invaders. The flooding has caused a halt in the use of heavy weaponry like tanks, creating favorable defensive positions for the Russian forces. The disaster has also hit the agriculture sector hard, impacting one of the world's most fertile agricultural countries, sending wheat prices soaring and further stressing global supply chains.
We've seen the reports that Russia was responsible for the explosion at the dam, which I would remind, Russian forces took over illegally last year and have been occupying since then. We're doing the best we can to assess those reports, and we are working with the Ukrainians to gather more information. But we cannot say conclusively what happened at this point.
The aftermath of the flood, however, is a double-edged sword. Some analysts believe the situation might serve the strategic interest of both Ukraine and Russia. On the one hand, Russia might have achieved its objective of halting the Ukrainian counteroffensive. On the other hand, Ukraine could use this as a distraction for launching its counteroffensive.
Четверте, увесь світ знатиме.
The whole world will know about this Russian war crime, the crime of ecocide. Such deliberate destruction by the Russian occupiers of the dam and other structures of the HPP is an environmental bomb of mass destruction.
Світові варто показати зараз.
With the situation in Ukraine evolving rapidly, the roles and strategies of the warring parties may continue to shift. Amid the military and political maneuvering, the environmental and humanitarian crisis unfolding in the wake of the dam's collapse pose a formidable challenge.
This is another devastating consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we are seeing the effects in the city of Kherson, the town of Nova Kakhovka, and 80 other towns and villages along the Dnipro River. Massive flooding, large-scale evacuations, environmental devastation.
The Nova Kakhovka Dam collapse has created an environmental crisis, a humanitarian disaster, and a strategic quagmire that further intensifies the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. As both nations continue to trade blame for this catastrophe, the real victims are the thousands of people displaced from their homes, the livelihoods disrupted, and the ecosystem devastated. As the world watches with growing concern, the fate of Ukraine hangs in the balance. The unfolding environmental and humanitarian crisis, alongside the escalating military conflict, presents a daunting challenge for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community.
The situation in the United States of America has spiraled after orange smoke has shrouded major cities originating from the Canada wildfires. As authorities battle to control the crisis, alert has been issued and people have been asked to remain indoors. Here's a report.
Smoke billowing from wildfires in eastern Canada have blanketed major cities in the United States. Authorities have issued alerts across New York, Detroit, New Jersey, Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia.
We recommend vulnerable New Yorkers stay inside. And all New Yorkers should limit outdoor activity to the greatest extent possible. This is not the day to train for a marathon or to do an outside event with your children. Stay inside, close windows and doors, and use air purifiers if you have them. If you are an older or have heart or breathing problems or an older adult, you should remain inside. And if you must go outdoors, wear high-quality masks such as a K95.
The Education Department said that schools will be held remotely because of smoke. People across the US and Canada are at risk of inhaling harmful air caused by smoke. Several flights in New York too have been grounded.
I feel very bad. I feel very bad. At times I can't breathe. Yeah, it make briefing difficult. Yeah, I even scheduled for a road test for driving for my driving license today, and it was cancelled. Yeah, I feel very sad.
When I came outside yesterday, so I could barely see without these things, and I didn't have them on. And I said to my children, I'm like, is it me? Or is it really foggy out here? Because it was that bad that I thought my eyesight was something wrong with my eyes. They're like, no, it's foggy out. So it's actually better today than it was yesterday.
The White House is closely monitoring the situation and is in contact with Canadian authorities.
Our team here at the White House is in touch with the Government of Canada. We have already deployed over 600 U.S. firefighters and personnel, as well as equipment like water bombers to help Canada battle the fires. We also have been in close touch with state and local leaders, including in Michigan, Illinois, and New York.
The forest fires originated in April in Canada's British Columbia and Alberta regions. The fires have displaced around 30,000 people so far. Quebec is the worst affected, battling around 160 wildfires and displacing around 10,000 people so far.
Our modeling shows that this may be an especially severe wildfire season throughout the summer. We're going to get through this together, and our government will keep being there with whatever it takes to keep people safe and provide support.
According to the Global Modeling and Assimilation Office of NASA, the smoke may travel in the days ahead. The smoke may travel from the US East Coast to the Midwest as well. Climate change is primarily responsible for wildfires in the western part of the United States. The fires risk not only human health, but also important organic substances in the forest. With Neha Kumari and Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And here are some other stories from across the world in World at a Glance. Take a look.
Former US President Donald Trump has been indicted in the classified documents probe. It is the first time a president has faced federal charges. Trump has been indicted with 7 counts in the indictment. The former president has written on Truth Social that he has been informed about his indictment by the DOJ and that he has been summoned to appear in the court in Miami on Tuesday. The Justice Department is moving additional resources ahead of this expected appearance. 4 children and 2 adults have been injured in a knife attack in the French Alps. All the 4 children were in a critical condition from stab wounds and were transferred to hospital. The attacker has been confirmed to be an illegal asylum seeker from Syria and was taken into custody. Sweden's Supreme Court has approved the extradition of PKK supporters to Turkey. The decision clears the way for the government in Stockholm to meet Turkey's demand that it hand over several individuals it considers terrorists as prerequisite for approval of Sweden's request to become a member of the NATO military alliance. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is on a visit to the US, has announced the first ever global summit on artificial intelligence later this year. The summit will consider the risks of AI, including frontier systems, and discuss how it can be mitigated through international coordinated action. This comes after the group of 7 countries called for action against AI during a summit meet in Japan last month. US too had held talks on AI code of conduct with the EU. Austrian emergency workers cleared an overnight train carrying 150 passengers after fire broke out in the mountainous Tyrol region. Around 33 passengers who had sustained slight injuries were taken to the nearby hospital for further evaluation. Kilauea, the youngest and the most active volcano on the big island of Hawaii, erupted on Wednesday after a 3-month pause, sending fountains of lava spewing skyward before cooling and spreading across its summit. Presently, the eruption is confined to Hawaii's Volcanoes National Park. Kilauea had earlier erupted in January. Prince Harry on Tuesday submitted evidence to London High Court against tabloids run by the Mirror Group newspapers for obtained information about him through illegal sources. He accused the tabloid newspaper for inciting hatred. He claimed that around 148 articles documenting events from his life were obtained by illegal means.
That's all in this edition of World Today. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates.